My name is Issa Shivji. At the moment I'm Professor Emeritus of the University of Dar es Salaam, and I worked there until 2006 when I retired. And after that, for 5 years I was the chair of Mwalimu Nyerere Professorial Chair in Pan-African Studies. Of course, the immediate inspiration was the Arusha Declaration, because when the Arusha Declaration was declared, we at the University of Dar es Salaam were the first post-Arusha generation. And one thing that the Arusha Declaration did was to give rise to very vigorous debates on the campus among the students and the faculty on the whole question of building socialism and what does it imply, and the role of imperialism in keeping us both underdeveloped against socialism. We don't forget that this time there was a so-called Cold War between the Soviet camp and the American camp. Internationally, this was the era of national liberation. So the whole question of revolution was at its apex. See, it is in that context that at the University of Dar es Salaam we had very vigorous debates on socialism. And this book was written as part of those debates. So it was not written as an academic exercise. Because while I was still a student, I published my essay called The Silent Class Struggle. And there was debate on the silent class struggle. And following that debate, I wrote this book to take care of some of the comments that were made on silent class struggle, but also to contribute to how do we understand building of socialism. What does it involve in terms of the classes? Because building socialism is not just anyone's business. It is the business of the working people. They are the historical agency to build socialism. So those are the kind of debates which gave rise to me to write this book as part of that, to make my contribution towards the debates. My generation lived through a very interesting period. We witnessed the Arusha Declaration. We witnessed national liberation struggles, including such inspiring struggles as the one in Vietnam, where the US imperialism was defeated. Also, the independence of Mozambique, and even South Africa in 1994. So we have lived through a very interesting period. And I witnessed the rise of revolutionary consciousness and its fall as well. Because after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the decimation of the Soviet camp, the debates changed. Imperialism assumed offensive, and the onslaught of neoliberalism was part of that offensive of imperialism. So, in a sense, if we were to sum up my intellectual understanding and the journey through which the country went, was from Mwalimu Nyerere's nationalism to neoliberalism. Okay? And following Mwalimu Nyerere, we have now 5 presidents under whom neoliberalism has flourished. And today we are in full-fledged neoliberal formation. So it has been an interesting experience, but also an experience where, particularly under the current period, you feel disappointed, particularly because of the nostalgia of the kind of debates that took place earlier on and the revolutionary optimism that we had at that time. And when I witness our younger generations, I feel that they have lost that continuity. And therefore for them, what happened after the Arusha Declaration is kind of new. And that is why all the more reason to resurrect some of those debates in the present context, of course, because you cannot recreate the past context. So you have to discuss those debates within the context of neoliberalism that we have today. One thing we shouldn't forget, that those debates which were taking place at the University of Dar es Salaam in those days also found their way in published material. So those debates were published, particularly by TPH, Tanzania Publishing House, which is now being inherited by Kuki na Nyota. And my friend and comrade, say, Walter Bugoya, was instrumental in publishing various books at that time. For example, The Silent Class Struggle was published in a small booklet as part of Tanzanian studies. Okay? Class Struggles in Tanzania was first published in 1975 by Tanzania Publishing House, and then published by Monthly Review and Heinemann in 1976. So publishing has been extremely important and instrumental, not only document but for people to know, to refresh their memories, because historical memory is extremely important. When memories are erased, you become anchorless, you become without anchor, because you don't know what happened from where you are coming. Okay? And that is why most of the right-wing regimes and fascist regimes, one of the first things they do is erase memories. Okay? And that's why they find that they attack the sites of knowledge production, like universities. When you look at it scientifically, one thing in human history is constant, which is change. Societies are never static. Sometimes changes become gradually, sometimes they happen very fast. And all these changes, they don't come about just like that. They come about through struggle. The struggle of human beings, both particularly among human societies, because all formations develop certain vested interests. And when you want to bring about change, you have to struggle against those vested interests to bring about change. And this we witness throughout history, in all places. Okay, so struggle is not foreign to us in Africa. In Africa also, when you examine the history, you will see struggle is central to it. People have always struggled for greater freedoms, for emancipation, okay, against their constraints. So that is an immanent law of human society. Change comes about through struggle. First, let me make clear that the role of publishing is not simply in documenting. Books are an extremely important pedagogical tool for education. Okay, so publishing becomes important. Books don't remain simply in the archives. You see, they are read, reread, and people discuss it. There are debates about it. They are used in schools and universities. Okay, and that is why it becomes an important pedagogical tool. So in my view, publishing remains important. I know that these days there's a lot of social media. Okay, but social media, in my view, cannot replace publishing of hard copies of books, because reading books has its own particular pleasure, which cannot easily get out of just the screen. The 50th anniversary edition of the Class Struggles, which Kuki and Nyota are publishing, not only reprints the class struggle, but I have done also a long introduction 85-page introduction on neoliberalism and class struggles under neoliberalism. So what I'm hoping is that first, the methodology that has been used in the class struggles to understand our society, to explain the phenomenon is extremely important. You cannot change something unless you understand it well. So one thing I hope that the younger generation will take away from class struggles is its method. And second, when reading the introduction, they will again, I hope, will see how the method that I used of analysis is used also to understand our current period of neoliberalism. Because currently there's a lot of agnosticism among our intellectual circles and young people, simply throwing up their hands how to make sense of the changes that are taking place, how to understand them. So we can record changes individually, but we don't decipher any pattern in it because we don't have a method of analysis. And I really hope that both class struggles and in my introduction will help our younger generation, particularly of intellectuals, to understand that there is a way of analyzing your society. There is a theoretical framework which you can use to understand it better and therefore change it for the better. It's a very interesting conference. The conference, which is organized by Codesria with the help of local organizing committee, is going to be a major conference for 4 days. Now, in 1990, November, there was a similar conference in Kampala, again organized by Codesria. And at that conference, Codesria, we adopted the Kampala Declaration on Intellectual Freedom and Social Responsibility. And that declaration came immediately after we adopted the Dar es Salaam Declaration on Academic Freedom in Dar es Salaam. So now this conference is going to revisit the Kampala Declaration, take stock of the changes that have taken place, and how do we see intellectual freedom and social responsibility of intellectuals in the current period. And therefore we have drafted what we call an annex to the Kampala Declaration, called Dar es Salaam Annex, taking account of that. And that's going to be proposed to be adopted by this coming conference. Now, Codesria has also supporting and co-publishing the 50th anniversary edition of Classicals in Tanzania. So it's also an appropriate moment to launch it, because many African intellectuals who are going to be present have heard about it. Others, like for example South Africa, I know, they actually read it underground during apartheid era. So they recall it with a lot of fondness. And some of them will be present at this conference. So then there cannot be a better occasion for launching the 50th anniversary volume than this forthcoming conference.